Hello, everyone. It's Dan here, as always, from Fireside Strategic. Welcome to our videocast, Humanity Builds Better Businesses, where we celebrate leaders that do transformational work within organizations, helping their clients grow and lead teams with humanity. Today, I'm really happy to be chatting with Carmen Acton, Principal Executive Coach and founder of Masterful Collaboration. Carmen, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so excited, Dan. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you. And tell me just a little bit about Masterful Collaboration in your practice.
Oh, my practice, I predominantly work with leaders and or their teams and focused on how to really step into their um, leadership voice and into an increased level of self-awareness so that they can be more connected between their heart, their mind, and their gut, right? Too many of us live sort of the head up. So that's a lot of the work that I do.
Huh. Can you tell me a little bit more about this connection between the heart, the head, and the gut? Why are you picking those three?
So there's actually some really great research from a neuroscience and a neurobiology perspective, but just to sort of narrow it down, it's too often we as leaders in companies tend to operate from the neck up. So we're working with our brain from a cognitive perspective, and we are not fully aligned and integrated. So we're not paying attention to the wisdom in our entire body, which is
Hmm.
the instinct in your gut, the emotions and feelings that reside in our heart, or elsewhere, throughout the body. But how to bring all of that together and know that we can actually have a greater impact on people that we are interfacing with, at work, at home, in our communities, etc.
Hmm. Couple of a really, really rich answer. A couple of things to dig into. I mean, number one, the first thought that comes up for me is what data is the heart really sending to us? What can we learn from our hearts?
So we can learn. Boy, we don't have enough time for this. We can learn so much from our heart with regards to what is really authentically ourselves, right? So it's a
Hmm.
piece of connection that if we're operating solely from our brain and the thinking level, we lose that connection to creativity, to all the other things that are possible. And I'm not saying completely, right? But the emotional pieces, there's data that says that over 60% of people are really suffering from connection, right? Lack of connection, feeling isolation and loneliness. And that's part of not really tapping into what our gut and our heart are saying.
Hmm. One of the first things you said, which I think is brilliant, is authenticity. There's something about our heart and authenticity. And I think it's very true because I think there's more ways in which cognition and our sort of thinking mind is influenced by things beyond ourselves, right? It's
Yes.
influenced by other people's emotions, other people's values, other people's thoughts. And the thoughts that are rolling around in our head, if we're ruled by them, can take us away from this place of sort of simple, earnest authenticity. When I think
Yes.
about the heart, that's sort of how I think about it.
Yes, absolutely. And kind of to that point, Dan, the so often we have moved away from our true essence, right? When we were
Mm.
a young child, we had all these thoughts, and we sort of protected ourselves, and that served ourselves to be successful in whatever role we might be in. But it also, if we're not aware of it, that mind chatter can really take us down a negative path and drive us and really impact our well-being.
Yeah. And I think another piece you brought up is the impact on others. And I think not only it's funny how on the one hand we've built these survival mechanisms, these ways to
Mm-hmm.
protect ourselves, but on the other hand, we can also feel when people are being inauthentic with us. We can feel
Yes,
that very deeply, and so
yes.
it's like we don't totally lose touch with the heart, but we sort of end up in this purgatorical kind of place.
Yeah, it's like the it's congruence, right? So what we're showing on the outside needs to be congruent with what we're actually feeling and experiencing on the inside in order to build trust
Mm.
and relationship with others.
Yes, congruence. I love that. And I think we are evolutionarily wired to look for it.
Yes, yes. And part of what you're talking about is the idea of the emotional contagion, right? So if I show up in a bad mood, I can actually transfer that to you
Right.
unknowingly.
Mm, now
So
I'm
so we
starting to
really want to
see.
be aware of what's going on. You know, how do we
Yeah,
become really present in the moment
yeah.
with what we are um, experiencing, and then how we interact with others, what others are experiencing, so that we can actually create that relationship and that connection.
Got it. And so if I'm a leader, right, our
Mhm.
audience of sort of human-centric CEOs, and they're sort of buying into what you're saying, that it's important for them to develop this greater sense of presence so that they can be impacted by others and be more intentional about how they impact others. Can
Mhm.
you tell me a little bit more about how you would work with a leader in developing this presence and shifting into this slightly different way of being?
So there's a couple different things because people come, at it from different perspectives, right? So I my whole philosophy is to meet the person wherever they're at. Um, Generally, we'll explore what's happening in their life, and it might be that we are working on resilience, right, and exploring what's impacting them from a resilience perspective. And one of the key things, Dan, that
Hmm.
people, especially in our world, basically all of the developed portions, we really tend to compromise our sleep. That has huge impact on productivity,
Yeah.
creativity, and people just don't realize it. Some people believe that they can get away with, less than 6 hours of sleep and be
Yeah.
productive, and it's
Yeah.
not true. So we'll explore that in some cases. In other cases, I might work with someone who is having communication difficulties.
Hmm.
I will typically always do some work with them that is more somatic based, right? How do we kind of sense into what's going on? And there are exercises that I use, such as perceptual position, stepping into another person's shoes, looking at it from
Hmm.
their perspective. Super powerful by moving and using your body as part of the exploration into what does your inner wiser self hold for you? What
Yeah.
wisdom is in your body that you
Yeah.
can tap into?
Yeah. Yeah. Somatic work is so, so powerful. And it's really interesting to reflect on the connection between sleep and somatic experience. I've noticed, I didn't really notice until right now, that I think my own somatic awareness and not just presence, but my somatic awareness, my connection to my body's wisdom, one of the surest ways to diminish it is sleep deprivation.
Yes, yes. And it
Yeah.
not only has short-term implications, it has long-term implications all the way down to diabetes, dementia. I mean, it's the research is amazing on this.
Yes. Yes. Sleep deprivation takes many forms, and there's a number of different causes. But when we talk about sleep deprivation, perhaps in a way that's most relevant for the audience, we could think about work-related sleep deprivation.
Right.
Would love to hear about your general thoughts on what some of the causes are, and knowing you're not a sleep doctor, your general sense of some of the causes and some basic steps that people can take to move in the right direction.
So some of the causes is, if you will, right? Having kind of that being connected to our devices, kind of 24/7. So learning to set some boundaries is really important. And that really also goes to not overcommitting at work, right? Because that tends to spill over into when you go home. And it's particularly challenging now because of the pandemic and having to work from home, right? So,
Yes.
so looking at what are those boundaries, what are the routines that we can keep in order to not fall into sleep deprivation. Also, appreciating the fact that getting adequate sleep actually is restorative. It gives you're far more productive if you've had a good night's sleep, or you go even for a walk around your neighborhood, get out in nature. All those pieces help with calming the nervous system, and the sleep helps with productivity, creativity. It's that REM sleep, having the REM sleep. Then if you want some specifics, just a couple quick tips.
Please.
No phone, no TV in the bedroom, that you actually, we in our society tend to have a lot of LED lights now, which is great. But what you want to do is start moving to the more daylight kind of lighting, the lighter stuff, and start moving away from that about an hour before hitting the sack.
Yeah. And I suspect, two thoughts come up. One is, with fewer leisure activities available to us, if we're quarantined at home, the TV is such an attractive backstop, right? It's like right there. We're probably going to spend more time with it than we would ordinarily, right? Without other leisure activities that we might be more used to. And so I suspect that's a challenge. And then maybe a second challenge is that with these boundaries between work and home life diminished, it can be harder to get your mind off of work, right? And that's a huge factor in sleep deprivation.
Yeah, it can be harder. And two tips are to go to some reading, like do some casual reading or listening to music. Those two really help with sort of, and again, I'm not a sleep doctor, I'm not a sleep researcher, but there's a great book called Why We Sleep by a neuroscientist out of UC Berkeley. I would recommend that. Very helpful, not only for us as leaders, but also if we have children that we don't, there's great information in there with regards to the sleep needs of our children as well.
Yeah. I think there's so much stress on all of us, right? Our families are feeling it more in moments like this. And so important when we learn these things to the best extent possible to share them with people we know, because as you pointed out earlier, we impact one another so much.
Right. Well, and one of the other things, Dan, kind of going back to your earlier question, one of the other things that I do with leaders is I've got several different assessment tools that I use. One that I find really helpful, there's really two. One is in the emotional intelligence area. The other is behavioral styles. So that can be really helpful, especially when you are now working remotely and you've got less, your cues are different, right? So from a behavioral style perspective, this is the DISC. It is based on three observable cues. And so getting to know yourself and how you might show up in crisis or under stress, and people of different behavioral styles allows you to adapt and make choice. It's all about the choice when you're triggered or something's going on. It's like taking that pause, the somatic pause, and making a different choice.
Yeah, creating that space, right, to just sort of be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we're in the space of noticing, boy, we've been triggered in some way. Something is going on. It's very, very valuable data. And it's important to take some time to process, whether it's journaling, meditating. There's many different ways that we can sort of chew the fat that's rising to the surface. But if you don't chew it, man, it can saturate, right? And it can
Yes.
really stick with you. It can not only diminish your sleep, but it can have all these other knock-on effects.
Right, right. And certain styles don't really emote, don't express emotions. They'll
Mm,
actually suppress them
yeah.
and to a boiling point, right? And then someone sort of explodes and you go like, where did that come from? And that can happen
Mm,
in the environment. One of the things in the pandemic in particular, and I forget the percentage off the top of my head, but a huge percentage of employees have expressed that their boss has not really checked in with them to see how they are doing.
right, right. What a simple but powerful suggestion, right?
Right, right. And then, if you're checking in with them and you're truly checking in with them, not like, here, Dan, go, I want you to go do XYZ and I want it by this
Yeah,
date. But
yeah,
hey, Dan, how are you and your family doing? I just want to check in with you. It doesn't take a lot of time.
yeah, yeah,
And it goes back to that connection, right? So many
yeah.
people are expressing a sense of loneliness and social isolation. And it's just like,
Yes.
yeah, it's important. It's really important.
So under discussed and so relevant for the audience for this interview because how many millennials and Generation Z, right, that maybe they've started a job at the first time, like an entry level job in the middle of this pandemic. They don't even know their coworkers. They're single. They're in an apartment in some big city somewhere. There is such an epidemic of loneliness exacerbated by the pandemic, and it
Mm-hmm.
has hugely under-discussed and underreported effects on team performance, on the organizations that we work with.
Yep. Yep. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity. It's a simple opportunity. And even myself as a leader, right?
Yeah.
I need to purposefully do that. I need to come from the space of this is really important for my employees, just to connect, just to have some sense of being held.
Oh, I love the way you put that, a sense of being held. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
tricky language for some people to use, right? It's so emotive. I can feel, I think about some CEOs I know, and I think they're great people. I enjoy working with them. I just couldn't imagine them saying that.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, Dan, I think it's interesting, at least
Yeah,
I come from a science background, right? A technical
yeah,
background.
yeah,
And I was in safety engineering, environmental compliance. I worked in an energy company, heavy duty, you know, engineering
yeah.
space. And I took a class when I was doing my MBA on group dynamics. And that just pivoted. It was
Oh,
like such a huge insight. And it's like,
yes.
it's about the humans. It's about being valued. If I feel more valued by my company, I am like 140% in, right?
Mm,
It's
mm.
huge.
I think that's such a great point. Group dynamics is, we have our individual identities, we have our group identities, and
Mhm.
it's hard enough to have individual self-awareness, but then there's this level of group self-awareness and listening to a group and seeing the identities and roles that we subconsciously take on in groups.
Yeah, yeah, it's powerful. And it's an opportunity for personal growth to really step into, how do I want to show up as a leader? What kind of impact do I want to have? And by doing that, how can I empower and bring all my people along in
Yeah.
a way that's serving our customers, serving our company, serving their personal growth and um, ability to really, to really perform at their peak performance.
Yeah. How could we, I'd love to take this to the level of, a sample listener. So someone who, leads a 50-person organization, they're not especially familiar with group psychology. They haven't taken a group dynamics class, but they have a sense that, there's something here. There's something worth exploring. How might they apply some of these insights to their team? What's a way that they could approach group dynamics?
Well, a simple way would be to, when they have meetings, would be to actually have a check-in, right?
Mm,
And hear from everyone in the room. And you could start with something fairly safe. And what I mean by that is, it might be, I'd love to hear what your favorite music or musician is, right? So that would be safe, but it's still personal, provided you're really interested in that. And then maybe you move that on to what's what's the thing you're most proud of? It could be in your life, it could be at work, etc. And sort of build that sense of community. And it's endless, really. I mean, as far as what's there, as long as it's something that really helps the team start to understand and grow more as a team, right? And
mm,
what they value. So, what's your favorite hobby? I might love skydiving and someone else might love hiking, and you'll start finding commonalities and discussion areas, connections that you might not otherwise know about.
hmm. And to bring this full circle, I think there's a very powerful connection between this group dynamics work and the presence somatic type work that we were talking about at the beginning, right? If you can show up more authentically, if you're able to listen to your heart, if you're in touch with somatic data, now you can show up in a group so differently. You can be that authentic contributor when you check in with someone. It can be done in this deeper, more empathetic way. And you can be more upfront about challenges that might come up in
Right,
a team. You feel compelled to tell the truth, even when it's challenging, if you're really tied into that somatic experience.
right, right. And the other thing that comes to mind, that can be really fun to do with a team is like,
Mm,
if there's a problem, it's kind of like, imagine we're all standing around this and we're throwing the problem down on the floor. It's like, what's interesting about this problem?
yeah.
What are the different types of things we might try to solve this problem without judgment of the suggestions, right?
Huh.
It's just a kind of a creative brainstorming.
I love it. I love it. Super cool. As we move towards the end of our time together, Carmen, a question that we love to end with. We've talked about some serious subjects here. We've talked about the pandemic, loneliness, disconnection from our hearts. When you're not doing this beautiful work, when you're not bringing teams together, when you're not helping organizations, what do you do for fun?
Oh, I do a combination, in the summer, water ski. I've been
Mm-hmm.
water skiing for years, and I'm an avid horseback rider. I've done work actually with groups using horses. I don't do that right now, but avid horse person.
Very,
Yeah,
very cool. Very
yeah.
cool. And last question is we look towards this new year, which we're shouldn't say look towards it. We've really started it. We're now in it. February is nearly done. We're nearly 2 months in. What's next for you? When you think about sort of what you want to achieve this year, what you want to do, what's sort of top of mind on your agenda?
What's on top of mind for my agenda is really kind of pushing the envelope with regards to how to create the leaders of the future that are
Mm,
connected, right?
yeah,
Mind, body, soul, so to speak. Mind, body, gut.
love it. Love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Love it. Well, listen, it's been a fantastic conversation. Learned a ton from you. Appreciate you and your work so much.
Thank you, Dan. Enjoy.